Apex Express, Asian Pacific Expression.
Community and cultural coverage,
Music and calendar,
new visions and voices.
coming to you with an Asian Pacific Islander point of view.
It's time to get on board the Apex Express.
Welcome to Apex Express. I'm your host, Miko Lee, and tonight we are focusing on Asian American men, Bruce Lee, and the Manosphere. I chat with renowned author and thinker Jeff Chang about his new book, Bruce Lee and the Making of Asian America, Water, Mirror, Echo. Then I speak with Rachel Koelzer, the communications director for Nakasec, about their new study of Asian American men and the Manosphere. So how are images of Asian American male identity being shaped and formed in our current society? And what does Bruce Lee have to do with all this? First, listen to my conversation with author Jeff Chang. Welcome, Jeff Chang, to Apex Express.
It's so great to be here, Miko. So happy.
I'm so happy to talk with you about your latest book. You're such a prolific writer, and here you have written a big Bruce Lee and the Making of Asian America, Water, Mirror, Echo, such a mighty title. I want to start first, just a question that I ask all of my guests, which is, who are your people and what legacy do you carry with you?
Oh my gosh, what a great question to start with. You know, my family, my communities, they all kind of blend together. The blood family, the kin family, and the chosen family for me. I guess I'm always, I'm a firstborn Chinese Kanaka, you know? I'm always aware that I'm representing, I guess. So, I carry that family with me wherever I go.
I think I know what that means, but for our audience that might not know what a firstborn Chinese Kanaka means, can you break that down a little bit? What does that mean to you when you say that?
I mean, it's just it's just that thing of, you're going to go out and represent the family, and you're thrust into taking on responsibilities and stuff for your folks, your siblings, your younger cousins, those kinds of things. I was always very aware of that within the family. My dad's from a really big family, had 6 siblings, and my mom's from a large extended family. So that's such a fantastic question, because Bruce was the second child, which, birth order and all that kind of stuff. It also squares, I think, with a Chinese family. He felt like he was always in the shadow of his older brother.
Okay, hold on. Let's get to Bruce in a second. I want to finish with you as the author, creator person.
Okay.
Wait, so you are the number one son?
I'm the number one son, yeah.
Oh, okay, I get it. And then what is the legacy that you carry with you?
The legacy, I just have to represent in a Pono kind of a way, in a proper kind of a way, the family and those kinds of things. I was also very rebellious. I came back after my freshman year as the Berkeley Radical. My Uncle Fungi was like, oh, here comes the Berkeley Radical. Okay. And of course, you got to sit down, drink beer, and tell them all the stories and that kind of thing. So, just being able to carry on a legacy of being upright and being just, right? And sort of being appropriate in all that you do. Just aware of that, grew up aware of that. Yeah.
And then what was your first memory of Bruce Lee?
I don't have a first memory. He was just part of the ether. You know what I mean? He was part of the,
yeah,
he was part of the air. I think I came of age after the generation, like my older cousins who were able to see Bruce in the theaters.
Mm-hmm.
We came up the next generation. We saw Bruce on TV. Return of the Dragon would come on and everybody would stop everything and just watch that. During the commercial breaks, we're jumping around and kicking each other and stuff like that.
I mean,
that kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
It was,
totally.
yeah.
When I was growing up, people would always ask me if I was related to Bruce Lee because that was
Lee,
like,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Lee.
Yeah,
There's not a
totally.
billion Lees in the world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I get it. And I try to explain to my daughters, and our kids are around the same age, the cultural phenomenon that he was. And it's hard to explain it to this generation because there wasn't really other Asian American representation than Bruce Lee when we were growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they have Alyssa Liu, they have Eileen Gu, they have
Yeah.
all of these different folks. So if you don't like Alyssa, you could like Eileen, or if you don't like, if you like Eileen, you don't have to like Alyssa, or you can
Right.
like them both. They have choices.
You could like Chloe.
Yeah. They like Chloe, right? There's choices.
Yeah.
Like Chloe's on the Olympic stand with two other Asians. It's
Yeah.
just,
Wild.
it's a beautiful thing. And it's not like the kind of reality that we grew up in. It's true.
Yeah. So, what made you decide to write this book? You've written many books about pop culture and around theory and around Americana. And what made you decide to write a book about Bruce Lee?
So the book came to me, actually. It was an Asian American editor back during a time, not so long ago, but a while ago, when there weren't a lot of Asian American editors in the business. And he came to me, and that was amazing in and of itself. And he said basically, hey man, you did this book on hip hop. This is back in the latter part of the 2000s, I want to imagine. I haven't gone back and looked at the date because it actually hurts me to think about it. But he saw, you did this book, like, do you think you could do a book on Bruce Lee? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. I was hyped to do
Please.
that because Bruce was our hero, just like
Yeah.
we were talking about. The most famous Asian American who's ever lived. It took me a long time to get going. And I got to admit, I lost the plot at some point. I just was like, what am I doing? There were books that came out about Bruce in the interim. There was one other biography that had come out in the late 2010s.
And I think I told you about one of the books. I think it's that book that I read, written by a white guy. And I wrote about it in Goodreads because I read a lot. And that's how I keep track of the books I read. I don't think about anybody else reading those reviews that I write. It's like writing in a journal or something. Now I use Storygraph. It's amazing, not commercial. But at the time, I used Goodreads. And the author wrote back to me. I think I told you this story.
Yeah. Tell me so what did you write, and what did the author
I
write back to
wrote
you?
that I thought that this author did not understand what an icon Bruce was to the Asian American community. And it was written in a way that didn't grasp the whole complexity of what he meant to us. He wrote this really mean note back to me about how he had Shannon, Bruce's daughter's support, and he was the one that could tell the story. And I thought, whoa, I was just shocked. That was the first time. Since then, I've had many different authors write back to me, but that was like the first one and wrote back in a mean way. So anyways,
Was it public, or this was a private email back to you?
I think it's public. I don't know. I have to go look. I
Okay.
was shook at the time. Like, what?
Ooh. Wow. Okay.
Anyway, so when I heard you were writing a book, I thought, okay, finally, yay.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I had this sort of crisis of confidence. I was sort of like, this is okay. We'll put it out there because you already went there. It's Matthew Polly's book, Bruce Lee: A Life. I read it. He had done amazing research. He had spoken to a lot of people. I thought I was supposed to do this kind of a book. Now, there's a particular kind of genre that folks who are maybe in the industry recognize, and it's called, I'm putting scare quotes around this, like the definitive biography.
Right.
In this particular case, the definitive biography, because he's a movie star, sort of coincides or converges with this other genre, which is the celebrity biography. I'm putting scare quotes around that too. So the mission of a celebrity biographer is really to tell a story of this celebrity is not as cool as you think they are. Like, their crap stinks. They cheated on their spouses. They didn't file their taxes. They kicked their dog. They said mean things to different people. That's a celebrity biography. It's basically to tarnish the star. And if not, then it's sort of a hagiography, which is sort of a whole other kind of thing. And we don't want to do that. As writers, we want to approach the truth. But there's sort of a certain kind of thing that comes into play with Bruce. There's a sort of genre of the takedown of Bruce, where it's usually men that are writing this. And the men are usually like, well, Bruce was my hero when I was a kid, but now I've got to take him down. You know what I mean? And so you see it over and over again. And there's a sort of a weird thing going on, especially I think with white males who have loved Bruce Lee in the past, feeling like they need to take him down. So let's say
Quentin Tarantino.
Okay, you said it, I didn't. But I was going to say like Albert Goldman, who was a journalist who famously wrote a takedown of Elvis Presley
Right.
and did one of Bruce that was unbelievably racist. Now, I'm not saying that Matthew was trying to do this at all. I think that his scholarship and his work was really, really good, but I felt crowded out a little bit. I felt like, gosh, I don't know what there is to say. I was very aware that there were a lot of books that had been written about Bruce and that I was writing into or out of or in opposition to a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
These are the Bruce Lee stories. And so at that particular point in the late 2010s, I just said, what am I going to do? And Lourdes, my partner, walked me up to the park and just tore into me like, what? You're going to give up now? You can't give up now. You got to do this. You have to. Who else is going to do this? And I'm just feeling all that Chinese Kanaka firstborn guilt and responsibility. She's about the only person that I can take a tongue lashing like that from. We walked back the mile to the house and my head was between my legs and I was like, all right, I'll do it. But I didn't know what I was going to do. To be completely real, I didn't know what I was going to do. So the other thing that was kind of happening at this particular point was I was noticing, and you and I both have children who are now adults, but at that time they were younger. They were like coming into their own. They were in their teens and that kind of thing. And that particular generation was coming up in some ways, like we talked about, like they had all of these folks that they could look to, right? Our kids have opportunities in media that we never had. We've had to break through in a lot of ways. And there was also, in a weird way, this sort of entropy around this notion of Asian America. Like young people who call themselves Asian American would also sit around and be like, what even is an Asian American? How do I relate to these other types of folks who are also classed as Asian Americans or who describe themselves as Asian Americans as well? Like politically, culturally, the kind of food we eat, the way we dress, who we hang out with, like all of the diversity that we've celebrated for so many years felt like entropy, I think, to them. Like there's no center to this anymore. Then the pandemic happened. And the violence was one way of saying, it's the Ice Cube moment. This is what they think of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was what galvanized, especially a lot of young people, to find a new sense of purpose, a new sense of activism, a new sense of how to be in the world.
And for maybe some young folks who had never felt that they had experienced direct racism before, to suddenly see it really blatant in the community.
Right. And it was personal. It touched all of us. I know everyone has stories about how we were treated during the pandemic, and especially the women and especially the queer folks. In a lot of ways, it was paradigm shifting. And it was paradigm shifting for me too. So I'm writing about this guy who considers himself a martial artist. And he's teaching people about self-defense. And in his career, being accused of fomenting violence, like a lot of folks in hip hop have been over the years. I'm suddenly like looking at this in a completely different light. What does it mean to think about self-defense and violence and training to be a warrior, right? I have a lot of folks who are in the military. My mom worked for the police department. Like, what does that mean? For somebody like me who's essentially anti-militarist, who has critiques of the police, as we all should, who's a deep supporter of Black Lives Matter, like, how do we think about what it means to be a warrior? And also to understand like the dignity, right, in wanting to be a protector.
Right.
Right. And to uplift what that means, but to kind of think about all of these existential questions. And then at the same time to see Bruce popping back up on our walls in murals and popping up in our feeds as a symbol, right, of pride, especially during this particular period near us in the Bay, like in San Francisco Chinatown or Oakland Chinatown. Young people bringing back the image of Bruce as a symbol of pride, and also this sort of cry for, like, can you see us? This sort of underlying desire to find solidarity. All of this mixed up with this, like, identity crisis that is now taken a different type of turn. So it was a lot to think about. And suddenly I was just like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to write about. So the book became about Bruce, but also about Bruce as an Asian American. and about him kind of traveling parallel to the rise of the Asian American movement.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful that way that it does tell this whole Asian American history for folks that might not know from the very beginning of our coming from the Exclusion Act to I Hotel to Vincent Chin. And not just like politically, but then also cinematically, because he crossed over so many barriers for us. So we're also getting Asian American cinema history with Anime Wong and Sesai Hayakawa, and even the Hong Kong industry. So I love how you combined all these different elements. It's such a wonderful way to look at that. And I'm wondering what made you decide to organize the book into these three categories of water, mirror, echo?
The line came first. Bruce's famous epigraph is "Be water, my friend." And me being the nerd that I am, I wanted to trace the origins of that and found it pretty quickly in a sort of Taoist type of text called the Lidza. And the full section that had influenced Bruce so much was moving be like water, still be like a mirror, respond like an echo. This is a line that actually resonates through Zen Buddhism as well. It was one of those things where when I first read it in Bruce's Tao of Jeet Kune Do, I fell out of my chair. It was amazing. It blew me away. We had all heard Be Water. We'd heard athletes say it. We'd heard business leaders say it. We saw the activists in Hong Kong using it in the streets. And yet to see all of this together was even deeper. That was a window into, wow. We think of Bruce as a great popularizer of martial arts. Bruce is not recognized as the great popularizer of Asian philosophy in a lot of ways. It happened during this particular period, during the 60s, where views of Asians and Asian Americans were beginning to shift dramatically, opening up in a lot of ways. So we had this phrase, my editor, Rakia Clark, and I, she was like, all right, how are you going to organize this, Jeff? I was like, I don't know. Help me. And she's like, all right, there's a water, there's a mirror, there's an echo here. And it actually tracks to his life and the arc of his story. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah. So I can't take any credit. I have to give it to my editor.
That's a good editor.
Amazing. Yo, she was amazing. Rakia was like, I signed you because I grew up and the only Asian I knew was Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up in largely Black communities. She was like, I need to know more. I really want to hear your take on this. And so it was an incredible collaboration in that way, because it was the type of here's where we meet. Mm-hmm. She was literally giving me free rein to be able to tell me a story. Tell me why we're meeting here, right? Why were we meeting through Bruce? That ended up giving me so much confidence and focus after I had had all of these years of being in the woods and what am I going to do? And then Lourdes trying to shake me up. That's kind of how
it took that time to simmer and your creative juices to be able to come up with this.
Yeah. It didn't feel like it at the time, but looking back now, I'm not the fastest Honu in the water.
Because you talked a little bit about confidence and how much Bruce shared about Asian philosophy, which I think is really true. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about his sense of confidence, both in himself and then a sense of destiny, like the mark that he was going to leave on the planet.
It's very interesting to me because I think that this has been kind of a part of the Bruce Lee legend. It was like he was born for a purpose. I was going through his papers and talking to his surviving family members and friends, like it was all improv. You know?
Really?
And,
him saying all those things was improv? What was all improv?
I think part of it, well, maybe it wasn't all improv. Certainly he was driven. He was incredibly ambitious and he was incredibly driven. And he knew where he wanted to go. Absolutely, 2000%. I think he entered this journey like all of us enter our journeys, like we're maybe packed for the journey, but we might find along the way that we don't have what we need. I was attuned to the points where that narrative would break down, to all of the vulnerabilities that he was feeling in different moments. And especially because I got to talk to folks who knew him, who maybe hadn't necessarily been interviewed in like the years, his very close Asian American friends, the folks who knew him off the martial arts training floor, the folks who thought he was weird and kind of corny, folks at UW, all of these folks knew him at the University of Washington And the common thing was this guy's goofy. He's just has a one-track mind. Like
Mhm.
he just wants to like show us like kung fu things all the time. Like who does that?
Like,
You know what
Bruce,
I mean?
stop already. We heard that.
Right. Like, punch me? Like, you want me to punch you? That was funny. I was just, and that was sort of also a mind shift, like, it was
Yeah.
like, oh, so there was a time
Before he was
the cool
revered.
guy. Yeah, before he was the cool guy.
Mhm.
Before he was the guy that was like super suave and like all the ladies wanted and all the guys wanted to be like. That's been the Bruce narrative.
Mhm.
So I was attuned to those parts. And what strikes me is how much at the end he stuck to his guns. Like, folks will read this in the last section of the book, and I don't want to give it away, but this is when destiny kicks in and Bruce rises to the top and he makes Enter the Dragon. He becomes this global star, and it was meant to happen. And I was like, no, he was actually fighting every step of the way. Like, every day of his life, he felt like this thing was going to fall apart. At one time, he boycotted his own movie because they weren't giving him what he wanted. Some of his closest friends say the real thing that killed him. People talk about the coroner's report, conspiracy, like evil spirits, that. But what he really did was like sacrifice himself in a way. That's how a lot of his friends talk about it, from a sense of this deep personal loss of somebody whom they loved so much and who was like there one day and suddenly gone the next. And so, to deal with that question of the melancholia that comes with what we experience when we're the survivors of someone we love who suffers a premature death. In that regard, like, I feel like the last part of the book too was deeply informed by all of the stuff that's come before with the Black Lives Matter movement, and understanding that these came from deep sources of grief and mourning and loss, thinking about what it's meant for Asian Americans to have to look at 2 generations before we get to the things that Bruce was fighting for representationally.
Yeah.
Before we can get to Everything Everywhere All at Once and Michelle Yeoh receiving the Oscar for that. Like, it took 2 generations. It took Brandon passing away 1 generation after his father. And then it took a whole bunch of other work that a lot of folks needed to do in order for us to be able to get the kinds of representations that we hoped that we might see after Enter the Dragon. And that's something that has produced a melancholia in us,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're talking a little bit about the people that you interviewed, and there's so many clearly that you did. And when I was reading it, the backstory of Taki, that was when I thought, oh, this is an Asian American author. I mean, I know you, but including that whole backstory, I thought was so powerful and actually helped to build out the story of who he is, who his friends were, and how he worked with them. I'm wondering if there's an interview that you didn't get.
So many.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't gone back to look at the original contract and the date because so many people passed away. I got started on this. I had 3 other books that I had to complete for my publisher at the time. This book was signed out of those contracts, and I had a full-time job then. And then when the pandemic and BLM sort of reached that inflection point, it was a much more than full-time job. I didn't have time to be able to actually devote to the book that I really needed to. I did research over a very long course of time. I did interviews over a very long course of time, but I started the interviews too late. So I couldn't interview Taki.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I couldn't. Yeah, Taki was alive. He lived to a very old age, but Alzheimer's
Oh, wow.
took him, By the time I started reaching out, it was a little bit like too late. I spoke to his son instead at great length and a lot of other folks around him. There wasn't just one. There were a million interviews I didn't get. Taki, I didn't interview. Jesse Glover, I would have loved to have interviewed some of his friends from Hong Kong, but we couldn't access them because of the pandemic. I had an amazing researcher on the ground, Winnie Fu, who did a lot of amazing work there and was able to source a lot of stuff for us. There was so many people, and even now, like, I was just up in Seattle for the unveiling of the Bruce Lee poster stamp. And I got to meet a friend of his from high school, and so I'm going to sit down. I've been talking with Shannon's cousin, Bruce's niece, who has been keeping the genealogies of the family. We've been talking a lot. I'm going to go back and interview her. And so hopefully maybe by the time the paperback edition comes around, I might be able to have some new information that I might be able to throw in that edition.
Yeah. What surprised you most about the research?
I think that Bruce was vulnerable. He felt very lonely a lot of the time. He had set himself out like this huge, impossible dream in some ways. He knew his destination. He had no idea how he was going to get there. That's where I talk about it was all improv. And at different points, he despaired. I don't know if these folks are really seeing me. I don't think they really understand me. After the Green Hornet, he couldn't get a job that he felt was befitting him, you know? So he's taking whatever work he can get. He's working as a fight choreographer for Nancy Kwan and just doing what he can. And he's relying upon people to put him on. He's doing kung fu training of a lot of the Hollywood top brass. And so he can reach out to them. But even they don't believe in him. They don't believe in him like that. And that's when he decides he has to leave. But it takes him literally 4 years to realize, oh, they don't see me as a main character. They don't see me the way I see myself. So I got to go. Even then, he's still trying to get on the TV show Kung Fu. When that door slams and they cast David Carradine in Yellowface, he's like, oh, and that's when the Ice Cube moment really sets in for him. Like, that's how they see me. That's how they really understand me. After that, he's fighting this battle to try to get back to Hollywood. That's one of the things he feels like he really wants to do. His thought is that I need to build up as much capital as I possibly can in order to be able to negotiate from a point of strength. It's just very hip hop. It's very Wu-Tang Clan. And he's able to kind of get there, but he's still got to fight these battles at the end. They just wanted him to shut up and kick. They gave him a black co-star and a white co-star because they were afraid that an Asian lead wouldn't make it. They wanted to name the movie Hans Island, not Enter the Dragon, because Oriental villains were easier to understand than an Asian American male lead.
That's such a horrible title, too.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? We would not be talking about Hans Island.
I don't know how they thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, it's true.
Is there anything else that you would like your audiences to understand about Bruce Lee?
What I tried to do is to portray him in the context that he actually lived in. We've got the legend of Bruce. We've got the stories of Bruce that have kind of burnished the legend. What I tried to do is to try to put him back as a human being, as a young person walking through Hong Kong streets and the streets of China, down Grant and then down King Street in Seattle, making it up to the studios in Hollywood, and what that meant for him to actually accomplish all of this kind of stuff. Because when we take away the legend, and this is one of the things I was worried about too, back in the late 2010s when I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write. When you take away the legend, I was worried that people were going to be like, oh, you just want to drag down this guy and you're like the guy that's just throwing water on our hero. But what I'm really understanding now is when you look back at what he went through and what he overcame, he actually becomes even more heroic to all of us. He wasn't a perfect person, but I think he remains a hero like more than a half century after his passing because of the things that he did.
I think that's right. And I think you do an amazing job in the book of incorporating this powerful Asian American history and putting his experience in a time and place that helps the broader world understand what an icon he is and remains. And I really appreciate you for writing this book and taking this time, and the amount of energy it took to percolate really pays off.
Thanks so much. I so appreciate you.
So I'm going to be interviewing Nakasec on their new study on Asian American men in the Manosphere. Are you familiar about this?
I can't wait to read this. I cannot wait to read it. It's so
Do you
necessary.
know about this?
No,
this report?
I didn't know about it. I'm glad somebody's doing it.
Yeah, so they did a whole survey and they found that there is a lot of Asian American men that are part of the Manosphere. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering for you, who's written about Asian American male identity, if you have thoughts about this.
So many thoughts. I was very much thinking about the Asian American Manosphere as I was writing this book, because these are my cousins. These are my friends. These are folks who I've sparred with.
Right.
These are conversations I'm having with folks at the bar over a meal. I'm really interested in seeing how we're able to understand what the appeal of the far right has been around questions of masculinity in this moment, and to win these folks back. I've also seen on the flip side shifts and changes around how Asian American masculinity is displayed, say, on social media in this era of a crackdown on immigration.
Yeah.
We really do need solidarity. We really do identify with what Latinos are going through. What I worry about is that the Asian American left, our first instinct would be just to be like, I can't talk to them. It's going to like upset me too much. I can't deal with this. Somebody has to, because those are our folks. And we've lost them over the last 5 years or so. And we got to get them back.
And are there folks that you know of that are working specifically on ways to pull this community back?
I imagine that there's a lot of work on the ground that's happening because this is the world that I'm in. I look to the folks who are doing podcasts or doing social media work and who are often men who are, kind of like me, like troubled by this development and trying to find a way to speak to their folks as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm monitoring that. I'm not deep within it. But like I said, I wrote this book understanding that particular subset of our community, those are the folks that are the Bruce Lee fans.
Yeah.
And are the folks who are involved in mixed martial arts and involved in athletics and all these other kinds of things. And they're not too far away.
Yeah. It feels like there's a disconnect between that kind of loving of Bruce Lee and that world and interaction with politics, interaction with current events and how that's impacting them and their families.
Well, I think I put that down to the fragmentation of the way that we receive media,
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, the ways in which social media is geared towards the extremes, the way it's geared towards the extremes and towards lifting up the loudest, crudest voices sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's exactly where the manosphere originates from.
Right. That's right? Where it lives.
Yeah, that's where it lives, is inside that pocket. It's about, again, trying to get inside of that and what's causing that. What's the melancholia that's behind that? What is generating this rage, this fury? And being able to channel that fury, that anger into ways that will actually help not just all of us, but specifically them.
Yeah.
That's an organizing problem that we have to take up.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to send you the research, the report, so you can read it.
I can't wait to break this open.
Okay, appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next up, I speak with Rachel Koelzer, the communications director for Nakasec, about their new study of Asian American men and the manosphere. Welcome, Rachel Koelzer, communications director for Nakasec. Welcome to Apex Express.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Can you first explain for our audience your organization that you work with, Nakasec?
So Nakasec is short for the National Korean American Service and Education Consortium. We are a national network of 5 affiliated organizations in 6 states.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the question I ask all of my guests, which is, who are your people and what legacy do you carry with you?
This is a great question. My people are the dreamers. They are the community-rooted change makers who believe that we are accountable and responsible to each other for our collective well-being, our collective liberation, and our collective joy and care for each other. My people are also Korean adoptees, part of the Asian diaspora, and people who have survived challenges of life and still seek joy and to thrive.
Thank you so much for sharing. Through your work at Nakasec, you recently released this report with a big old title, Asian Men, the Manosphere and Social Media, an inflection point for Asian American advocacy and American democracy. Wow. Can you first talk about what inspired this study?
I became aware that there was this ongoing trend and challenge that we were having of not reaching young Asian men. Our followers were predominantly non-men based on gender and significantly more women following us. Something like 70-30, 80-20. I talked with other organizations who also do advocacy and community-based work who also faced similar challenges. I just wondered why. What is it that is preventing us from effectively reaching this large portion of our community that we serve? So from there, we went and partnered with Dr. Tom Wong and really started to dive into exploring the reasons behind it.
So let's back up for a second. Can you explain for our audience what the manosphere is?
The manosphere, in kind of simplified terms, it's a loosely connected network of online communities, influencers, and content creators who focus on men's issues, masculinity, dating, health and fitness, financial wealth, and gender dynamics. It includes this wide spectrum of content that range from like the more everyday fitness, self-help to more controversial topics like anti-feminism, traditional gender roles, and critiques of modern women and society. The common thread across these loosely connected communities and spaces is this underlying thread of traditional gender norms and expectations.
So is the manosphere inherently misogynistic?
Yes.
Well, that was a
It
really
is.
quick response. Yes. No, no
I mean,
question.
being real here, yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
okay.
And so within the broader manosphere, there's also men's rights activists, some more like toxic masculine type views. There is a little bit of a range, but yes, inherently there's deep-rooted misogyny.
So how did you find people for your study? Were they self-described, people that participated in the manosphere?
We partnered with Dr. Tom Wong, who is at the University of California, San Diego, to conduct this survey. He used the voter file. They are self-identified Asian men, and we set the parameters to be between the ages of 18 to 45. They identified across political ideology, across political party, and started with more general questions around their social media use. What platforms were they on? What were the reasons that they were on social media? Who did they follow? To get a baseline understanding of where and what they're consuming. We know that they're online. There were questions about engagement with the manosphere.
What did the study reveal? What was surprising to you?
What was really shocking is that 1 in 5 young Asian men are regularly engaging with manosphere content. That's 20%, 1 in 5.
It's a huge number.
It's a huge number. Yeah. They're engaging with this content that is starting off pretty innocuous. Like you want to look better, you want to feel better, you want to have better relationships. What's being embedded in that to varying degrees of subtlety are these values of more traditional expectations and roles. It's alarming that this many young Asian men are regularly engaging with it. We defined engaging as commenting, following, sharing. There were questions about how often they're seeing it across their feed, whether or not they're looking for it or not. And we found that 35% of young Asian men are encountering manosphere content on their social media feeds several times a week.
Are they identifying it as manosphere content?
They identified it, yes, in the survey, we did provide a definition beforehand of what the manosphere was. And so anything within that would have to fall under this category.
Are most of those influencers and content creators Asian American men also?
That's a really good question. When both Dr. Wong and our team, Nakasec team, were doing some research, we didn't actually come across, when we were looking at like the bigger names, right? Tens of thousands, upwards of millions followers, we didn't really come across many of those large followers that are Asian men. The men that are perpetuating it, regardless of their race or ethnic background. And I think what that points to, you mentioned white supremacy earlier, but there's this idea and value that's perpetuated of color blindness. And so in this space, the gender kind of supersedes the race. What was really curious is later on in the study, we also asked about early childhood experiences and lessons from the adults in their lives around masculine values, around showing and expressing emotions, and around representation of Asian men in the media. A large portion agreed that the overall representation of Asian men is harmful. We know, for those of us who have been interrogating our experiences in the world for a while, we know that Asians and Asian men in particular, we're stereotyped, we're troped in a lot of ways, right? Of these feminine, unattractive, nerdy, geeky, or you've got the other side, you've got the Bruce Lees, you've got the Jackie Chans, right? There's a flattening that happens. And I think that is where the manosphere is dangerous and potentially even more appealing to communities who feel that they've been overlooked and undervalued, because it offers answers. And those answers are really harmful to other communities, but they're still providing answers.
Can we speak a little bit more about the perceptions of Asian Americans in the media? There's the stereotypes around women being either the dragon woman or the sexual exotic kind of play toy. And with Asian men, as you were pointing out, it's either the kung fu guy or the nerdy guy or the effeminate guy, right? There's like not that much distinction. Is that your perception as well?
Yes, I think there's been, even from when I was a child and growing up over the past 30 years, there's been improvements, but I think overall, yes.
When I grew up, the only images were movies and television, and there just was not that much. So we did have those stereotype visions, but it was so limited in scope and content. There just was not as much content. Now it's everywhere. There's content in your phone. There's all these different social media apps. There's all these different channels you can watch. I'm wondering how that has impacted Asian Americans' men's perspectives on how they see themselves. And if that, just looking at social media and the manosphere and how that impacted the reason why you did the study and the outcomes of the study.
The study showed that 26.7% of the men who were surveyed feel that Asian men are portrayed favorably in social media. That's actually still a very low percentage. 71.6% agree that Asian men are often underrepresented or stereotyped in media and popular culture. Even though, yes, there's still greater representation, that there's still the portrayals and the quality and caliber, or what that representation actually is or how it's developed, is still significantly lacking. What the manosphere offers, one, it offers answers as to how you might get away from those, right? You might be able to get out of that, which is to be this hyper, quote unquote, masculine, dominating character. It points the blame directly away from systems like patriarchy and like supremacy. It doesn't really interrogate what internalized misogyny, internalized racism looks like and is doing. It's saying, you know what, the problem is actually that women are becoming too independent. The problem is that men are becoming too effeminate. And so there's this combination of race blindness and naming another villain in a way that punches down. It's a combination of looking for genuine insight and information to better understand their experiences, And they're finding answers, but the quality of those answers and the ways that they're getting pushed to those are very problematic, very concerning, not just for what that means for women and queer rights and immigrant rights and marginalized communities' rights, these kinds of values that are being espoused and normalized, but what that means for how someone starts to view themselves and their role in the world and the impact that that has on the systems and structures of our society.
Ooh, there's so many interesting things that you said. I heard you say the men are finding a sense of belonging in the manosphere, and they're getting answers, and the answers being right-wing propaganda, which is being fed to them. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. The problem is the quality of the answers that they're receiving, the values that are embedded within that, whether or not they're being explicitly named. It's not, there are, again, if you go further deeper, there are folks that are very proud to be part of the manosphere. That is a known and a shared identity as far as like, we are part of the manosphere. And then there are those, I think Joe Rogan himself is like, I'm not part of that. But if you listen to his content and his messages, right, there's a lot of those traditional right wing, very violent and misogynistic roots that are coming out in there. It starts off very innocuously, looking for answers, looking to better understand your life, your experiences, and what you can do about it. That's innocuous enough, right? And there's even like, there's a lot to be said about that kind of, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Initiative, right? To better understand and seek resources and things. But unfortunately, through a combination of the algorithm, through investments into these kinds of content creators and spaces, we're seeing that those proliferating a lot more. And so whether or not young Asian men are intentionally seeking this type of content, they're being fed it regularly.
I also heard you say this comment about race blindness, and I get that because it's like men, we're men and we're bounding together. But race blindness feels like a rube, if you will, for white supremacy and misogyny. It's this way of saying we are all one, but very much targeting specific folks that are not in positions of power and control.
Yeah, absolutely. It flattens and erases the experiences of people who have been marginalized through our laws, our policies, and it stops the need, it stops the self reflection and interrogation too that is asked of us otherwise, which is to reflect on what power do I hold and what is my responsibility with that power, whether it's having more privilege because I'm a citizen, having privilege because you're a man, even if you're also historically and presently marginalized because of your race as an Asian person. It reduces that depth. And again, that responsibility for self reflection and interrogation.
And so, given all that, your report says this is a warning sign, which clearly it is, and an opportunity. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about what is the opportunity here as we're in this time of great change, great revolution, the year of the whole fire horse. Talk about how we can actively disrupt that pipeline to radical extremism.
It's an important question and it's an important conversation that we need to have. There needs to be an awareness and an understanding of what it is that is threatening the health and well-being of our community and of our country. What this study showed is we're at an inflection point. The percentages, the numbers, we're not so far down the rabbit hole, but we're like right on the edge. We're like at this tipping point. And so intervention is necessary now. This is a great opportunity for organizations, for community leaders to be having these conversations, to be engaging in political education with their community members, to be educating and informing and connecting with members of their community, particularly young Asian men, And it's an opportunity for these in-person spaces and these digital spaces to be countering the manosphere with our own answers. I think that's one of the biggest things, especially when we're talking about a digital space, to be investing in content creators, to be investing in artists, to be investing in doing the work of putting out our own answers and solutions and explanations and analysis of what is happening. It's a call to action and an opportunity for funders, donors, for people who have the ability to put money behind these kinds of spaces online. There's just a significant disparate investment. It's an opportunity to be really investing in community, really investing in recreating spaces, building out spaces. I'm thinking particularly, again, community-based organizations who can be understanding what the risks and threats are and understanding their communities, where they are, and not necessarily adding to, but with this threat in mind, how does that inform the spaces that you're creating or the strategies that you're engaging, whether it's online or in person?
We need to gather up our brothers, our nephews, our uncles, gather them all up, talk about our real Asian American history of resistance, our power, our ability to move forward, connect with that in person, pull them out of the manosphere, connect all together so that we could move forward as a community in solidarity with each other.
Absolutely. There's opportunities across the board, regardless of where your particular position is, even if you're not a part of a community organization or you're a teacher, a parent. One of the things that also came up in the study was that across ideologies, across the political spectrum, and across age groups, there was a significant number. It was like close to 70 or over 70% had shared experiences of being discouraged from showing emotions, from seeing modeled from the men in their lives examples of stoicism, of more traditional masculinity, more traditional gender norms. And so there is this also aspect of, yeah, bringing in folks, bringing in our nephews, our brothers, our cousins, our friends, our uncles, and a reflection upon what can we do to be raising our next generations, our current and our next generations, to value themselves and those around them who are different, to be able to express emotions, be able to have deep reciprocal relationships, and to have respect and understand what it means to reflect on one's privilege that comes as a result of an identity in this very hierarchical world, whether it's as a man under patriarchy or white under white supremacy. These are skills that can be taught and can be learned. I think that this is also an opportunity to be reflecting on how we as a society are understanding these.
Well, Rachel Koelzer, thank you so much for joining me and sharing about your report. How can people find out more about your work?
Thank you so much for having me. You can follow Nakasec on most social media platforms. Visit our website. We've got tons of resources and information there. And check out our local affiliates. You can find out more about them on our website and on our socials. If you are, in the area, would love to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Just a note that Apex Express will be off air for Fun Drive until May 28th. But we want to acknowledge that May is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And there are film festivals and cultural events happening all around the country that celebrate our diverse experiences. One Bay Area one to note is CamFest. It's back. The Center for Asian American Media returns for its 44th year, and its festival from May 7th to the 10th is at the Kabuki Theater AMC in San Francisco. with an amazing program of impressive filmmakers. Check it out. Maybe I'll see you there. And happy AANHPI month. Please check out our website, kpfa.org/program/Apex Express, to find out more about our show and our guests tonight. We thank all of you listeners out there. Keep resisting, keep organizing, keep creating and sharing your visions with the world, because your voices are important. Apex Express is produced by Ayame Keen Lee, Anuj Vaida, Cheryl Trong, Isabel Lee, Jelena Keen Lee, Miko Lee, Miata Tan, Preeti Magala-Shakar, and Swati Rayasam. Tonight's show was produced by me, Miko Lee, and edited by Ayame Keen Lee. Have a great night.
Bobby Seale.
And Huey says, nope, 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 it's not necessary for you to leave. We're a new organization. We're here to observe the police. We've already checked the law out, and all of you as citizens also have a right to stand and observe these police. They're brutalizing our people in the community, et cetera, and so on, so on, so. So please, everybody, do not leave. Stay here. We're a very disciplined organization, and this cop had got out of his car, standing there listening to Huey with his back to the cop, tell these people this, and the cop, you have no right to observe me. And Huey turned around and says, no, according to such and such a California State Supreme Court ruling, every citizen has the right to stand and observe a police officer as long as they stand a reasonable distance away. And that particular ruling, the reasonable distance is constituted as 8 to 10 feet. I'm standing approximately 20 feet from you, and I'll observe you whether you like it or not. And some sister in the audience, she say, well, go ahead on and tell it, brother.
Storytelling for social change on KPFA.
Base Command, all systems go. We are go for launch.
This is when KPFA music takes over. Raw, eclectic, real. No playlist algorithms, no corporate formatting. Just sound that moves, shifts, and surprises. Jazz bleeding into cumbia. Folk crashing into noise. The underground rising to the surface. No two nights are ever the same on KPFA. Throttle up. This night has no ceiling. Find your groove at 94.1 FM, kpfa.org.
holding steady.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.